Hi everyone, Alicia here from Employment Hero. The story you've been told about AI at work is that either it's an economic miracle or a workforce apocalypse. Our new research suggests that it's neither, and that the truth is far more human and far stranger than either headline. We surveyed nearly 8,800 business leaders and workers across 4 countries, and we found something we're calling the AI paradox. So here's the paradox in two numbers. 97% of AI adopting businesses say that they've seen at least one measurable improvement, and 77% of AI using workers say that they've hit at least one AI caused problem. Both true at the same time in the same companies. To unpack what's actually going on here, I'm joined by Lisa Cowie, our Senior Insights and Research Lead who ran this study. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you, Alicia. I'm excited to talk about this large-scale study looking at both sides of the equation. So we surveyed employers and employees. And the most interesting finding wasn't a single number. It was the gap between two stories being told about the same tech.
Okay, and let's start with the name. What is the AI paradox in one clear idea?
Well, AI in the same organization is producing two very different and opposing experiences at the same time. So, measurable gains for the business, but real friction among some people doing the work. There's optimism at the top and anxiety on the floor. The paradox is that both are genuinely true, and most coverage just focuses on one half of that. So, this is not actually about employers versus employees, but recognizing what's happening on the ground.
And this isn't like some companies win, some lose. It's actually the same company experiencing both at the same time.
Yeah, and there's a difference, and that's pretty well reported between small and large organizations, although that could close with this tech. But the key insight isn't really that it's about large versus small, it's more what's happening within a company. So that's what makes it a paradox rather than just a mixed result. And I think what we can sort of sum this up with is that adoption has run ahead of maturity.
Okay, and let's talk about the loudest headline first, that AI is removing these entry-level jobs. But your data pushes back on that. What did you actually find?
And yeah, that's pretty heavy in the media, actually. And we did find that 16% of the companies that we surveyed have cut entry level roles. And among those, AI was the most cited reason. So that fear isn't imaginary, but the bigger picture is what's happening at the other end that could be indicative of what's to come. So overall, we found that 42% of companies grew their entry level headcount over the last 2 years. But among businesses with AI at the core of their operations, that jumps to 62%, more than double the 30% rate of non-adopters. So it's actually the most AI mature firms are the ones who are most likely to see a place for entry level staff.
Wow, that's a really striking reversal. But can we say that AI is causing that growth or just that the best companies are doing both?
Yeah, it's difficult, and data like this can't indicate causation. So we can't fully settle whether AI is driving hiring or whether the most AI mature firms are just simply the strongest performers overall, so actually are more likely to hire. But at a minimum, we see that AI advanced firms are not the ones gutting all entry level roles. So, this sort of AI kills the graduate job narrative might just have a bit more nuance than being absolutist.
Interesting. And one of the findings I keep coming back to is around hiring. So where do AI skills now sit when employers are deciding who to hire?
So, soft skills still actually lead. It's not that AI skills have wiped everything else out. Work ethic is at number one at 56%, communication 46%, and quick learning 43%. But among all businesses, AI skills rank sixth across at 31%, ahead of prior work experience and ahead of holding a degree. And then among AI advanced firms, AI skills rank first, pretty intuitive. But what's really interesting is just the sort of rate of change that's happening. So 58% of businesses have already rewritten hiring criteria to weight against AI skills, and another 24% plan to. So that's the vast majority of businesses that are really rethinking how they hire.
That's so interesting, especially ahead of a degree. And we're seeing this pop up in the job ads themselves, aren't we?
We are actually our own first party platform data show that mentions of AI skills in job descriptions are up over 200% year on year. And we've seen this year that Claude is the fastest growing skill term of 2026. So that shift is definitely already showing up in job ads. But actually, the workforce aren't necessarily entirely ready. So we found from the data that 6 in 10 workers rate their own AI competence as low to average.
Interesting. And so if AI skills matter this much and we're not seeing that in terms of how they're rating them, like who's actually teaching them? What did you find on the training and how people are upskilling?
Yeah, this is surprising. We found that half the workforce say that their employer does little or nothing to help them build AI skills. So businesses haven't really got ahead of that yet, for the most part. But actually, most employees have accepted that as quite normal. So only 38% of businesses that we surveyed run formal AI training, although among AI core firms, it's nearly 2 in 3. So actually, people are teaching themselves, and more than half of employees report that they're learning from social media, so YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, Discord.
That's a really surprising twist in who's shouldering that burden.
Yeah, the balance overall does skew to individual ownership. So 41% of workers see upskilling as their own job versus 27% who put it on the employer. The rest, put that somewhere in the middle. But interestingly, the youngest workers, so those that are aged 18 to 24, and they're entering a market now that ranks AI skills above a degree, they're 1.8 times more likely than over 55s to say that AI training is their own responsibility. So they really are taking on that burden themselves.
Yeah, wow. And we're actually deep diving into this in our next episode on how Employment Hero closed that training gap internally. So if this is your issue, watch out for that one next. And Lisa, I wanted to touch on the one of the ones that really stopped me in the data was that AI feels like cheating. Um, it stopped me in my tracks. It's the same technology being described in completely opposite terms depending on whether or not you run a business or you do the work. Can you take us through that?
Yeah, so while 60% of employers think that their staff view AI positively, we found that 42% of AI using workers say it feels like cheating. I mean, that's a lot of people that are not feeling wholly positive about their AI usage at work. And then on the other side of that, 65% of employers say that AI is accelerating their business, letting them work faster. But 63% of employees say that AI has created more work, so checking and verifying outputs. So that same tech in the organization is causing quite different experiences or perspectives. And that really is the contradiction and that sort of paradox in action.
But why this guilt though? I think, why would using a tool your employer wants you to use feel like cheating in that sense?
Well, there's often no permission and no shared norm in businesses. So the employees that are using those tools assume that they're getting away with something. And actually, it's a pretty core psychological issue because AI is really challenging that strongly held notion of what work actually is. So, this silence that's often happening at the top creates guilt at the bottom. And that guilt drives the use of AI tools underground, which is actually the real risk for businesses because then they lose all visibility and sort of knowledge of what's going on with their employees.
I would have assumed that the people who are best at AI would feel the most secure in their roles, but your data suggests the opposite.
Yeah, a real tension happening here and sort of pretty counterintuitive. So this is what we've sort of termed the expert paradox. So the people in the workforce who are most competent, and that's self-reported, are more likely than the average worker to say that AI is building valuable skills, 78% versus 59, and they're more likely to agree that they're producing higher quality work, 87% versus 73. So that all makes sense. They see the gains, but they're also more likely to feel anxiety about their role, 54 versus 40%. And they're more likely to feel exposed to layoffs. So the closer people get to AI, what seems to be happening is the more clearly they see both the promise and the gains that it's given them, but also the threat of having that tool in the first place.
And the productivity benefit isn't landing evenly either.
Indeed, the dividend is skill dependent. So 87% of expert users say that AI has freed up time, and that time is given to high impact work. But among beginners, that's just 35%. So a really significant difference based on how skilled that worker is. And nearly 3 in 4 workers overall say that AI has boosted productivity, but only 1 in 4 say that boost is significant. And the time saved doesn't always become free time. Only 21% say it lets them work fewer hours, while just as many say it fills up with more of the same tasks. And for 12%, AI saves no time at all for those people. So this isn't really all or nothing. There's this sort of messy middle ground that's happening.
It's so fascinating. And one of the things I think that we picked up as well was that the paradox looks very different depending on where you work. So We surveyed four markets: Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and Canada, and the paradox shows up everywhere, but it looks very
Yeah.
different in each one. What stood out region to region?
Yeah, you're right. The tension is universal, and that came through very strongly from the data. There's not, this huge, sort of huge difference by market, but the texture on the ground is actually quite local. So first of all, with Australia, we found this to be the confident but conflicted market. So Australian workers lead on skills perception. 61% say that AI is helping them build more valuable skills, the highest of any market. 75% say it's boosted productivity, again, the highest of all the markets that we studied. But Australia also has the highest anxiety. 45% said that AI makes them feel replaceable. So the more they seem to value it, the more uneasy they feel.
So it really, Australia's really feeling that upside and the unease more intensely than anyone else.
Yeah, high conviction, high anxiety. But also note that in Australia, workers are the most likely to report that the time they save with AI is redirected to higher value strategic work. So the benefits are really being felt there too. So onto New Zealand, this is the calmest market. New Zealand has the lowest anxiety, just 34% said that AI makes them feel replaceable versus 45 in Australia. And they also have the lowest amount of AI guilt. And New Zealand workers are also the most likely to say that AI training is their employer's job rather than their own. So a more collective mindset. But these stats are likely driven by overall adoption, which is lower too versus all the other markets that we studied.
So a lower anxiety, but also a little bit further back on adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. And New Zealand tends to measure the lowest on all the measures related to AI integration and usage, but that just means there's more runway ahead for that market. Okay, the UK, this is the leaders market. The UK is furthest ahead on the business side. 70% of firms are increasing AI investment, the highest of all the markets studied. And 55% strongly agree that AI is driving innovation. And then on the worker side, we found that daily AI usage has jumped from just 9% to 25% in a single year. And UK employers are the most optimistic about how their people feel, but that optimism may be running a little bit ahead of reality because guilt is still high among employees, and it rises significantly among Gen Z, where over half feel that guilt.
So the UK's leadership gap between how confident leaders feel and how workers actually feel is particularly wide.
It is, and actually, the UK's got the widest optimism at the top versus friction on the floor split. And lastly, Canada. This is what we've called the guilt and shadow AI market. So Canada has high AI guilt, similar to other markets, 43% of workers, and rising to the highest level among Gen Z, 56%. And just under half of businesses say that they know their staff are using personal AI accounts at work. So this is the clearest shadow AI signal in the data. And Canadians are also the most likely to say that time saved with AI just fills up with more tasks.
Oh, Canada's really bringing that shadow AI problem to the surface with nearly half using personal accounts at work. I'm sure the security team and all these businesses is not particularly happy.
Agree, yes, it is the sharpest illustration of where there's no permission or standard. And then when that happens, as we discussed earlier, AI use doesn't just stop, it just goes off radar.
So whichever market you're in, I guess the lesson rhymes is that the gap between leaders and workers is real. It's just measured differently.
Yeah, the same paradox exists with the same tensions bubbling away everywhere. So the fix is actually similar or the same everywhere: visibility, permission, and creating a capable and confident workforce.
So let's end on the opportunity because there's a lot of genuinely hopeful findings here. AI as the equalizer. What does that mean?
AI can be the leveler. So we found in the data that 39% of small businesses report cost savings from AI, and that's almost identical to the 41% in large enterprises. And productivity also scales with how well people use the tools, not just with company size. So all this indicates that it really can create a level playing field for the larger and the smaller businesses together. And for SMEs, that's a chance to compete on terms that used to only belong to the bigger players. So the conversation really has moved from adoption to competence.
Okay, so if a business leader or owner is watching this and feels behind, what are the first three things they should do on Monday morning?
So, three quick things on Monday: close the visibility gap. So, find out how your people are using AI without judgment so it stops being hidden. Number two, give explicit permission and a shared standard so that AI stops feeling like cheating. Number 3, invest in capability, not just tools, because it's clear from the data that that dividend goes to the skilled and not the equipped. And this will reduce the anxiety and the fear once people are genuinely empowered and supported.
Lisa, thank you so much. A big reframe for me is that AI at work isn't really a technology story. It's a story about the gap between how it feels to lead the change and how it feels to live it. And the businesses that close that gap are the ones that really win. If you want a full picture, have a look at the AI Paradox at Work report on our website. We'll have the link in the description, every stat we talked about today, and a lot more, including the complete country to country breakdowns. And if you want to see how Employment Hero helps teams build an AI ready culture, closing that gap, exactly what Lisa described, we'll have a link to that next episode as well. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for everyone watching. We'll see you next time.